So we are going to be talking about Ally inside of WTClass and how you can make course content more accessible as well as inclusive for all students. More than just simply those with disabilities or stuff like that, but how can you make your content more accessible so that everyone that accesses your course can get your content in the best way possible for them in particular. So, come on, let's see. There we go. All right, so how do I make my course more accessible and inclusive? So Ally is in every one of your classes already. It's a built-in product into Blackboard, into WTClass that helps you be able to identify content that is in your class that you can make it more accessible, and it provides instructions on how to make it more accessible. So it provides that documentation, tells you step by step, how do you fix it? What do you need to do to make it more accessible? It also provides students with alternative formats. That way you aren't having to necessarily create a whole bunch of documents in different types to be able to, for your students to be able to have access to. It just naturally gives everyone the ability to have access to all these files. Some of the ones that I like to point out are like an audio file. It will automatically convert as much documents as possible into an audio format. This has been great for students who might be commuting, students who might be like athletes and traveling, going to games and stuff like this. They can then open up a document in an audio format and listen to it while they're on the road, so they're not having to read it while they're driving or read it while, you know, it's a bumpy road or something like that. And so it gives them the ability to access your content in different ways without you having to go in and make all of these changes and conversions and stuff like this. And so it automatically does those once you set up the document with the most accessibility. Some of the other things are tagged PDFs. It'll do HTML files, so if students want to kind of strip out some of the extra stuff, they may not have Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint, it'll convert it to a more mobile-friendly format. EPUB for students that have that. Braille, if you have a blind student, or blind student, they can also have it in a Braille format. There's lots of different options that it automatically does for you. So what exactly does Ally do? How does it work? So if you've been in any of your classes and already uploaded documents, you may have already seen those color dials, the red, the orange, the light green, the dark green. It gives you basically a visual scale as to what level of accessibility your document is. Red is something, you know, you really need to work on this. It's got a lot of problems. They may be very simple, they may be more difficult, but without checking it, you don't know how simple it is. The orange then it's a little bit better. It has a few issues, but not as many. And then you got the two greens. We really always say you want to get it into one of the greens, because there are some things that are really hard to convert to get it fixed, to make it that dark green, that perfect green. So as long as you can get it to the green, you're doing really well, because some of those things can be more difficult, and just getting it to that green is going to make it the most accessible for the majority of students and make it where those alternative formats are easy to use. So with that thing I mentioned, how does it help you work through those steps? So it gives you a status, an indicator, a percentage of what it sees your document as. And as you go through and you review the feedback that it has, or you improve the file, you make changes, and then it'll eventually improve your score. And you're trying to get to 100%, of course. But like I said, sometimes there are some things that you're just not going to get to that 100%. And so that light green indicator gives you that kind of adjustment to that. Because like I said, not everything can be perfect in some cases. So it walks you through all of those steps. So why should I make my course content accessible? So several different reasons. It helps with diverse needs for your, you have diversity of students. So you have all sorts of people, and so you have lots of different needs of those students. The most common one are, kind of the challenges of disabled people. Your cognitive, your visual, your physical, your hearing, all of those disabilities. They may be on a minute scale, or they may be on a severe scale. You may have someone that has a hearing impairment that it's hard to read, hard to hear things, but they can hear most things, where having closed captions on a video just helps it just that little bit, where they can, those words that they're having trouble understanding, they can now see those. Visually, you might have somebody who's colorblind, and so they can't see some nuances you have in your course, or an image where you're pointing to something. They can't see that. So having some of those other alternative methods can help some of those students. You also have your, the big one is like your English as a second language learner. While not a hearing disability, having those other formats can help a second language learner, because now they can see your captions and things like that, or they can hear some of those words because they're like, I don't know what that word is written out, but if I hear it, now I know what that word is. So sometimes doing those things can help those students that they don't have a disability by any means, but it makes it more accessible and inclusive for every one of your students to be able to access all of your content. And then we also have mobile learners that go into that. So how many of your students are using mobile devices? Last time we checked, 95% of undergrads own a mobile device, according to a survey, a national survey. So how many of them are accessing your course through some kind of a mobile device, whether that's your iPads, tablets, your cell phones, different things like that? We have a lot of students that are using their mobile devices to access your content. By making things more accessible, again, it makes it so that it fits in that smaller format, but also gives them the ability, like I mentioned, for like audio, so that if you have a student who's accessing it from their while they're driving to or from somewhere, they can play it through their speaker or something like that, and still be able to participate in the course, but not have to do it with just the sole reading mechanism. And then lastly, there's always rules and regulations. There's state and federal laws that require it. There's WTNU policy. There was also a Chancellor Summit on accessibility last year that they focused on accessibility. So there's several of those rules and regulations. I always like to mention, according to the law, you are supposed to have all of your content that you place online fully accessible from the moment that it becomes available to students. The reality is you're probably not going to have everything fully accessible at that very moment. But if you start now, and every time you add a new document in, you look at those ally indicators, you look to see what can be improved upon, and you improve those, then going forward, you don't have as much stuff you're working on. You're not having to fix everything all at once. But it gives you a starting point to start improving your content as you start adding in new documents. So some of the other benefits, you do have, student success. It is not always just for those students with disabilities. Think of, like I said, second language learners, those mobile learners, things like that. And this is also something to consider, looking at adding into your annual review process, that you've made improvements to your classes accessibility-wise. So now we're going to actually start looking at Ally in the system and how do you remediate some of the files. So we are going to look at 3 of the most common file types that are added into WTClass: Word documents, PowerPoint documents, and PDF documents. And I'm going to go over several things within them, the most common issues that are found with them as well. We're not going to be able to cover every possible scenario, every possible thing that needs to be fixed, but the idea is that you understand the concept of how Ally works, as well as some of the main issues that are found with documents and how to fix those things. So we are going to start with Microsoft Word. So we have 3 things that we are going to look at. We are going to look at headings, we're going to look at alternative text for images, and we're going to look at data tables that are inside of a document. So understanding what is the purpose of a heading. Why should I care that I have a heading in a document? So headings divide a document into logical chunks of material. Why is it important? This is, in your syllabus where you have those headings where they're bolded and they're bigger so that it draws attention to to that material so that students can easily see things. It also facilitates searching, especially for a sight impaired student. If they have a reader on their computer, what it will actually allow them to do is skip sections. So if they know that if they're looking at your syllabus and they are specifically wanting to know the policy on incompletes and they know that you have it in there, they can just do a quick search for incompletes and say, okay, skip through each one of these headings, and it'll read each one of the headings until they get to the heading they need, such as incompletes or maybe the grading policy. And so instead of having to listen to all of the material before that, they can jump faster to that. Because maybe they can't remember the word incomplete. Maybe they just remember, how do I get an extension on this course? And so by searching in this capacity, they could search through each one of those headings until they are reminded of what the title is that they're looking for. Like I kind of just mentioned, headings are essential for students with visual impairments. This is more than just your visual look. People say, oh, well, I have headings because it looks different. Well, if you are visually impaired, you don't see that difference. It just reads as the same form of text. So you're probably used to using headings because of that visual appearance. Like I said, that's not the same thing. This is like if you've ever done a thesis or a dissertation, or even quite often if you've written an article, they often want you to have like a table of contents. Well, typically to create those table of contents, you have to do that using headers. And so you've probably used this in some form or fashion, depending on what you may have created or had to make, or you've seen it in action. And so those are what we're looking for. Word has them built in to Microsoft Word, so it makes it very easy to be able to add and adjust. So one thing that I like to always point out, I'm probably not going to be doing a whole lot of this to save kind of room on my screen to get things a little bit bigger. But if you don't have two monitors, and I know a lot of faculty don't, but if you have two monitors, pulling up WTClass on one side for Ally and then your document on the other side helps to be able to look and switch between the two systems easily. If you only have one monitor, maybe you're at home, maybe you just don't have dual monitors in your office, you can also mimic that within a screen by basically, if you're on a PC especially, if you click and drag the title bar of anything like WTClass, you can actually kind of pull it over to the far left side and it'll snap and then show you what remaining documents you have open and then allow you to snap that to the other side so that then you can see both things at one time. So let me just kind of show you what that means. Okay, so here is my my WTClass browser window. If I pull this all the way over to the left, you kind of see it kind of do a little ghost image that it bumps out and takes up half the page. And whenever I do that and then let go, it's going to take up half of my screen. It then pops up over on the right what all other items I have open, what other programs I have open, and then I can easily say, okay, this is what I want to work on. I want to work on my Word document. I select it, and then it pops up on the right side. So I can compare the two at the same time. I always like to mention this. If you also start to see, it kind of condensed my WTClass. My menu has now collapsed and things have changed. Don't worry, it's not gone away. As soon as you make it full screen again, it's going to adjust. So no worries there. This just gives you the ability to work in both at the same time. So how do we use Ally? So I have, this Word document open. So this Word document that's on the right side of the screen is the same Word document that is uploaded into this course, this example course. And you can see our Ally indicator is an orange color. So if I click on this Ally indicator, it's going to open up my Ally help information. So I can see I'm at a 41% right now. It's going to tell me within the document kind of what's going on, and it tells me what's wrong with here. I also have my all issues option here that I can open up to be able to see exactly what it's found. So it's found that it doesn't have headings. It's found that I have images that don't have a description, and it has found my tables that are missing headers, the 3 items that I mentioned that we were going to look at today. And so I can click on any one of them. I'm going to start with the headings. So I'm going to click on my heading option. And so you can see I can upload a mediated document in here. And then it tells me, what does this mean? So it gives me information on what exactly do I need to fix? Why do I need to fix this? What's going on with this? It helps provide kind of insight into the importance of this. And then how do I add headings? So this is what we're going to look at. How do I add headings? So when I click on how do I add headings, it then pops up with a page. Okay, what kind of source are you looking at? So is this a Microsoft Office document? Is this a LibreOffice? Where did my original file come from? It also gives me the ability to download the original document right here, so I don't have to figure out how to get it. I can also download it up here at the top. So I'm going to select my Microsoft Office because that's what I'm in. And you notice it gives me directions. Now, how do I fix this? I open the document. I select the text that I want it to be a heading. I go to the home. I select styles. So it gives me a walkthrough showing me exactly everything that I need to do. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to go through and do that here. So again, here's my Word document on the right. When you look at it, you go, well, I already have headings. Right here, Hurricane Basics. That's a nice big heading there. Let me turn off my extra things that you may not like to see. It already has headings. That's nice, big, bold. It's red. Here's, kind of a subheading. You look at it, and then from a visual perspective, you go, you already have this. But from a visually impaired perspective, there are no headings. So what we are specifically looking at is here in this Styles area. It's on the Home tab. That very first tab that you're in whenever you're in Microsoft Word, you're looking at the styles. So I'm going to, not that button, sorry. I'm going to expand this out so we can see kind of all the different styles. Notice there's a heading 1, there's a heading 2, 3, 4, and so you can see all the different kind of headings and kind of things built into this. Now I have a special template, so it kind of looks differently. Most people are going to have probably like one that looks like this. This is typically the default one. So if I come up here to this first one, we always start with heading 1. So that's where we always start with. You always start with 1 and you move your way down the headings. So here's where I want heading 1. So I've selected my area. I look for my heading 1 and you notice it kind of changed the look. Whenever I click on this, it made it over here. Well, I don't want it to look like that. I've already set it the way I want it to look. So let me undo real quick, Control Z. And so I want it to actually look like this. I don't want it to be something what Word decides it to be. I want it to be what I want it to be. So up here where heading 1 is, if I right click on heading 1, the very first option says update heading 1 to match selection. So I'm going to select this option, and now we'll see in our little preview it changes, but it keeps this. And now this is set at heading 1. So now we've started adding in our headings. So we're going to go to our next section. So here's our next one. And so again, I'm going to want it to be now heading 2 because this is a subheader. So again, I go now to heading 2. Well, I don't want it to be that blue color. I've already set it up. I can right click and do update heading to heading 2. Oops. Let me try that again. Every once in a while it decides to do some funky things. So I'm going to just select the one question. Ooh. The one word. And so I'm going to try this again, do update to heading 1. Oh, what is it doing to me today? Try a different one. There we go. Sometimes it tries to catch things before or after that word, and so it does that weird stuff. But now we can see whenever I come here, heading 2 is now selected. Oh, come on. Heading 2. There we go. Everything is now heading 2. Now, once I set it to something, now that this is set, you'll notice if I move over any other text, it's going to show that same look. So the nice thing is that as I get down to here, I go, well, this is also heading 2. So I can just click on heading 2. I don't have to do the right click set as the update heading 2 to match selection. I've already set that to match. So I can scroll through all of this and just set up my heading 2s real easy. So here's another one that this would be good for heading 3. And so we can see how each one of those kind of goes. Now I'm not going to do this last one yet to kind of show you one other area. So if you're looking at this and you go, well, did I get everything? Did I forget something? Under the view area, there is an option called navigation pane. And what that does is it actually shows you what exactly has been set up as far as headings are concerned. So if I come back down to my last area, we notice the storm's end is not in there. If I go back to my home and go and set it up for heading 3, notice now it appears over on my navigation. So this lets you see visually how someone with a visual impairment is able to skip through these sections more easily. So this helps you gain an eye, if you're looking through your document, what is important for a student to be able to find? What are those titles that I need to make sure are headings? It gives you a hierarchy. Here's heading 1, it ends at here's heading 2, and it ends at here's heading 3. So some of the important things to note is you always, when you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you always go up 1 level. Anytime you go up 1 level. You never skip from 1 to 3. You always go 1 and then 2 and then 3. You can have multiples of the same one. So I could have multiple 2s here, multiple 3s here. I can have multiple 1s. But whenever I'm moving to a subheader, it always needs to go up a number. When I go back, so from this heading, I could go back to level 2, level 1. Either one is fine. When you're going back, you can skip numbers. It's just when you're going up, you don't want to skip any numbers. So that is how you add in your headings. It's pretty easy. Like I said, you just use those styles and set up your numbers real easily there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this real quick. And so now I'm going to come back to my Ally. I'm going to click next because I followed all of these rules. It doesn't go into as much detail as I did with how do you adjust it, but that's a common question faculty often ask. So this just gives the basic for how do you change it. And so when I click next, so it gives you a little bit of information about some other stuff. So once I get back to my drop file or upload file, so I'm going to browse, I'm going to find my document. So there's my Word document. I'm going to open that file. And so it's going to replace the file. Now, one reason while it's doing this that you want to upload it through this versus editing the actual attachment that you have within WTClass and just replacing the file that way, this will put you at the front of the queue to get the percentage checked faster. If you click on the drop down, go to edit, upload your file, and save, it puts you at the end of the queue, and now you have to wait for everyone else who has put an Ally document in to process through before it's going to update yours. Where when you do it this way, it immediately goes through and checks it. You know exactly when it's ready to go because it's going to pop up and see it. So now you see we went from, I believe, 25% to 61%, and it's telling us, well done, looks good. So then we can move on to our next item. So this document contains tables that are missing. Okay, so again, same process. What does this mean? How to set table headers. So I'm not going to necessarily go through all of these because I know what's going on, but basically anywhere that there's a table, it's wanting to make sure that there's a header row set. This can be done in 2 different ways depending on the document and kind of what you have set up. It kind of depends on which way will work best. But what I always like to do is I always like to click in my column, and basically what this is for, what this is meant for, let me rephrase that, is so that if this goes over a page in Word, it will split this title row across both pages. So what I mean by that, so let me come in here. And so I've now split this table across 2 pages. Well, I don't know what these different columns mean now because it doesn't tell me what is this hurricane under. It's a type. What is this under? It's a description. It doesn't signal that, especially again in that screen reader. So how do I signal to this to Word that I want this to carry across? So what I always like to do is I right-click inside of my row and I go to Table Properties. I go to my row, and there's an option as Repeat as Header Row at the top of each page. So I select that checkbox, I click OK, and now we notice now it's duplicated that type and description across my page here. We'll also notice as it moves that second one, it just moves that up to the top of the page. And so it always keeps that new heading at the top of each one of your pages, so when it breaks, it makes it easier to know what exactly that's for. So I'm going to come through and delete these extra things because we don't need the extra ones, but that's what it's looking for. Also under the design one, you'll notice that there's a checkbox for header row that can also solve this problem as well. This, I believe, is how Ally tells you to do it, but I always like doing it the other way for some reason. So you have multiple ways for how you can do that. So once again, I'm going to save my file. We're going to browse. Let's see how much this changes it. Gotta give it just a little bit of time. And so there we go. Now we're at 84%. So now we're in the light green. So we're moving up in colors here. So the last one is our image descriptions. So again, we go through here. And so one thing that I like to point out, so what is the point of having an alternative text inside of here? Your image descriptions. So alternative text or image descriptions give a summary of your images, your charts, your graphs, your maps for what is important for the students to know. It helps your students connect the images, content to what exactly the context of it is. And again, it always helps with searching, and it is definitely essential for your students that have visual impairments. Again, that can be color blindness, that can be full vision impairment, that can be just hard to see, just someone who has difficulty seeing. So what we can do for our image description, so you look for your images, you click on your image. When you right click and you go to format picture, it's going to open up a box. You go to your adjustments here, you go to alt text, and this is what we're looking for. We're wanting to make sure that there's a description in here. Now it says image result for hurricane. I have this in here mostly to point out, is this very descriptive? Image result for hurricane. Well, does that really tell me what is in this image? Now that may be all that I need, because the whole point is just to point out, here's an image of a hurricane. So this one may not need anything different. But when I come down to this one, there's now nothing showing. There's not a description. So someone who's visually impaired has no idea what this is. They have no idea that this is basically a diagram of the wind and water circulation of a hurricane. It doesn't give any of that. So this would be a time that I'm going to want to enter that in. Now, I'm going to stop for just a second because I want to show one other thing. Now, there is a way that you can find a little easier all of your images and all of the kind of things that need to be fixed inside of Word. So accessibility-wise. So if you go to File, you go to Check for Issues, there's a Check Accessibility built into Microsoft Word. So here it's going to give me some information on things that I might need to change, things I might want to look at, and things I might need to change. So it mentions that the table that we added doesn't have alternative text. But if you notice, Ally didn't pick that up. But if you want to make it more accessible, this would be another thing that you could go in and add. It also, Word gives you all that information just like Ally. Why should you fix it? How do you fix it? It gives you all of that information in here. So I can come in, find my picture here, and again, so it's going to tell me, right click, click format. It gives me all of that information on how to get in here to put in my description. So just for the instance of time, I'm going to make it very simple. One thing that I sometimes recommend, type it up in description so you can see it in full, and then copy and paste it into the title area. There are some screen readers that read the title. There are some screen readers that read the description. There are some screen readers that read both. So if you copy it into both, you're guaranteeing your students should be able to see that or hear that no matter how they do it. So if you notice, as I started adding in my description, it removed it from my missing alt text. So one of the other things that's in here that part of the reason why I like this checker is if you do copy and paste something odd, sometimes it adds in some extra things. So this picture 2, this is an image right here. Do you see it whenever you're not clicking on it? No, you never would notice it. So it's kind of hidden in here. So it would be a visual, it would be a reminder here to say, maybe I need to delete that. I don't need that in here. So I need to delete it. And it's now holding that image in there for some reason, but it's gone. So it gives you some more ways to check to make sure that you've got everything in this file to be fixed. There are some things like warnings. These are not things that you necessarily have to fix. It's the errors that you want to look at. All right, so again, I'm going to save my file. I'm going to browse. I'm going to fix this or upload this, and we are going to see what level we are now at. There we go. So now we have a perfect score. So when I click close, we will notice that it will update here. It's thinking, there we go. And there's my perfect score icon there. So we can see that by going through these process, it has allowed us to improve that score. So now we're going to move on to our PowerPoint. So PowerPoint, we have 3 common issues with PowerPoints. We have slide layouts, alternative text, and data tables. Actually, let me stop for a minute. I wanted to see if anyone had any questions about Microsoft Word before I continue on. Feel free, write them down in the chat if you have questions. Feel free to come off the microphone or come onto the microphone if you have questions. I want to give everyone just a minute in case anyone has any questions specific to Microsoft Word for just 1 minute.
Hey, Krista, I have a question about the equations. Do we treat them as images or do we treat them as tables?
Typically, equations should be treated as an image. And so basically you are supposed to write out all the different components of the equation. So the numbers, plus or minus, square root, I don't know all the math stuff, but you're supposed to write out in words what each one of those is and the order you would read that formula.
Because that can become a little bit cumbersome.
Yes. So I will also mention as a self-promotional thing, we are doing a Equatio training on Friday that will help with that very thing. So that you are not necessarily having to write it all out. Equatio helps to convert it into a format that is then accessible.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, so I'm going to continue on. So like I said, Microsoft PowerPoint, we are going to look at slide layouts, alternative text, and data tables. So the most common problem we're going to talk about first is your slide layout, which is basically going back to that headings thing, just like we saw with Microsoft Word. So let me pull open here. All right, so here is my PowerPoint. And I'm going to do this and switch over here and pull up the corresponding PowerPoint here. So here's my PowerPoint file, as well as all of the different pieces with Ally again. So here it's mentioning headings, it's mentioning data tables. It didn't do anything with our images. I guess my one image had alternative text already on it, but I'll talk about how you do that as well in PowerPoint. So the headings one. So the big thing with headings with PowerPoint is making sure that you're using the default slide layouts. And what I mean by that, let me shrink this just a minute here. So whenever you go to add a new slide, you notice there are always these kind of default formats, these default slide layouts. It is always recommended to stick with these as much as possible. Don't do the blank one and then say, okay, I'm going to insert and I'm going to do a text box and I want this to be up here and I'm going to say hello. that's not what the best way to do it to make it accessible, because what it's going to do is it's not going to tag anything as a title, as a heading. It's not going to put it into the right flow for reading, as far as accessibility and reading of that particular slide. So we want to stay away from using that insert text box as much as possible. It's not something you can't do, but you want to try to stick with using those default layouts to begin with, using these and then altering them from there. So basically what you do, so here's my title slide. So if you already have a PowerPoint and you're trying to find out, is this accessible? One way you can do it is you come in and you click on the reset and see if it suddenly adds in these extra boxes. So notice it added in a title and a subtitle. Well, that means this is not a title. Alternatively, if I delete this out, notice it doesn't give me any text. So I know it did not have a title in there. So what you want to do, this is the tedious part, you basically have to go copy, paste it in to where it needs to go, and then you delete out what you don't need. And so I'm going to reset the slide once more so I get it back in there. Now if I say, you know what, I really want this to be bigger, so I want this to be this size, and I want this to be bold, and I want this to be this size. You can go in and adjust all of those. You just want to start by using the boxes, the predetermined boxes that are there. If it's something you don't want, I don't want a subtitle, you can delete it, but you just want to stick with using what's already in there. So same thing, you would come here, we would do reset. Okay, so it didn't do anything. So let's check the layout. Oh, this is a blank layout, so it doesn't have anything. So I might need to change this to the title and format. Again, same thing, copy this, paste it in here, delete this out. Now I could take and say, okay, now I want this to be bigger. So I want this to be a larger font. I want it to be bold or unbold. Same thing here, copy all, paste it into here, and delete my old one. I may have to do some reformatting. You notice this one has italics for secondary ones. So I may have to do some reformatting of some different things, or resizing to make this bigger because it doesn't fit. Another way that you can do it is you can actually duplicate a slide. And so here's where I'm going to change it. Again, same thing. This is a blank slide. Well, this one has 2 content, so I'm going to do it this way with the 2 content. And so I'm going to do the same process of going through here and copying and pasting everything in. Come on, take it. But now, because I have that duplicate, I can also go back and see, okay, does this look like what it needs to look like? Okay, so here's my new one, here's my old one. Okay, so, well, it doesn't quite fit in the same way. Okay, so I want it to be bigger size. It wasn't quite big enough. I want it to be centered. It's already bolded. Okay, that's looking closer. I can easily compare the two now to see if I'm getting it closer to what I already had. Maybe I want to move this up here. I can go through and change those and adjust them to what I need them to be. And then once I get done, the old slide I can easily just remove. And so basically I would go through all of that for each one of these different things. So again, reset didn't do anything, changing, same process. And being able to go through and deleting all of this out so that it fits back into that default section. And so that's the important part with using slide layouts, is it helps to ensure that navigation, the headings are all consistent, and that PowerPoint is reading them as the appropriate different levels of titles and stuff. All right, so our next thing I'm going to talk about, again, those images. So same thing as Word. If you right click on Word, you go to Format Picture, we go here, there's alternative text. Notice there is that description already there. Also with PowerPoint, it also has that check for issues, check accessibility, so you can easily find your images as well. Here's again, there's one of those hidden ones that I may want to delete out. Check here, oh, another hidden one, delete out. And so it can go through all of those as well. Notice no header row specified. That's our last thing that we'll talk about as well. But you can go through all of that by doing it this way. So you can see all of those different things again in that manner as well. And so again, if I wanted to go in and make this more clear, I can make this more clear. And so that's our alternative images. And then back to our data table, kind of the same process. The difference is that with data tables inside of PowerPoint, notice there's not that same option like we saw in Word. So where alternative text on an image is the same, it's not the same inside of PowerPoint. So this is where you get back to that setting up this header row option here. It may change the look of it a little bit, but that's how you can set that up as well. Another thing is if you use any of these designs, if you click on it, it will automatically create a header row for you as well. So those kind of help make those things easier as well. The last thing I kind of like to mention is the order of reading. As long as you stick with the default slide layouts, you don't have a problem. But if you do add in those additional components that aren't built in, you need an extra image, you need additional text boxes or something like that. The thing you always want to check back and look at, let me come here, is on our, which one is it? This is the one I never can remember which one it is. No, I can't remember. Now I'm going to have to remember where it is that I'm wanting. Now I can't remember which one it is that I'm looking for. Oh, there we go. Arrange and then selection pane. So the thing about the selection pane is this is going to tell you what order a screen reader is going to read. It always reads from bottom to top. So when you see title is at the bottom, this is actually the first thing it reads. It's backwards. I don't fully understand it, but that's how it is. So it's going to read whatever's in the title first for this slide. So if you click on it, it actually highlights it. And then it's going to read whatever's in placeholder 5. So it's going to read this one. And then it's going to read whatever in this placeholder. So it's going to read this one. And that's the order that it's going to read it on this slide. And so same thing. So it's going to read this text box because I didn't reset my layout. It's going to read my text box, but it's not going to label it as a title of the slide. It's just going to label it as a text box. Then it's going to read my table, and then it's going to read my picture. And so it's going to always go from bottom to top to be able to read it. So if you do add some of those other things in, you want to make sure that whenever you're thinking about it and it's reading it on the screen, does it make logical order? You don't necessarily want it to be right, to be showing some intricate photo here if you then explain that photo over here. It may be better to explain the photo and then have the photo displayed, you know, to be talked about. And so you got to look through some of those things as well. All right, how are we doing on time? Okay. So lastly, let me switch back over. Oh, sorry, I did not. Last thing I was going to do was I was going to save here. And then I was going to upload my file again so we can see how those changes affected. And so it looks like it made it to 99%, didn't quite get it, so it didn't like my table colors. That pink is honestly hideous to me. I would probably change that to a different color. But basically, they're just, the contrast is basically saying for somebody who might have low vision impairment, it would be difficult to see that white on top of that kind of lighter pink. I might want to change it to black or something like that to make it more contrasting. But I am in the 99, that light green, so I'm just going to leave that. All right, so our last one are PDFs. So let me switch back over to my slideshow here. Oops. There we go. So with PDFs, there's sometimes some tweaky things with it. So PDFs most always will require some additional assistance. You can always try to do it on your own with Ally, but we want to let you know that there are some things that are very difficult to understand and figure out how to fix. The important thing with PDFs is, do you have the original document? If it was a PowerPoint or a Word document that you converted into PDF, you actually want to start back in those PowerPoints and PDFs, or sorry, PowerPoints and Word documents, and then reconvert them. There's some things that have to be done in PDF, but a lot of the things that you're editing and fixing end up being things that you want to look back at the original file. So we like to disclaimer, we are here to help you. So please don't think, oh my gosh, I have all these PDFs in my class, what am I going to do? If you need help with a PDF, let us know, and we can help work through it with you to see what we can do to help fix things if you need to. So I just want to point that out to begin with. Some of the common kind of things we see with PDFs is when you convert a web page into a PDF. We highly recommend you using the Adobe Pro add-on in your web browser to convert over print to PDF. Just hit Control Print or File Print and print it that way. What it does sometimes is it doesn't catch everything in the right way. It doesn't get that full navigation. Where the Adobe Pro add-on will actually look deeper at the HTML that's built in to try to get those converted in a good PDF format. Just as a reminder, as faculty and staff, if I know we have a couple of people who are mostly staff but teaching a course or two on the side, as faculty and staff, you do have access to Adobe Creative Suite. You just need to let ITSC know that you would like an account, and they can get your account set up, and then you have the ability to get Adobe Pro on your computer with that. So that is an option. I know at one point we kind of took Adobe Pro away, but you can get it. You just have to kind of let us know about that. So again, you want to try to skip, try to avoid the printing the PDF, and really try to use that Adobe Pro add-in to make sure that it is a full-fledged document coming in. So the other common one that we see is it's a scanned document. Somebody took an old textbook, an old book, went to the photocopier and copied it and made a copy of it. The downside to doing this is it's now an image. None of the text on that page is readable to a screen reader because it's an image, not text. So there are some ways to try to convert it, but it's not always accurate and it's not always easy. So it's always one of those things that when we get these, we always talk about, okay, is there another option for this? Is there an alternative type of thing? Is this book available in a online format that we might be able to get access to that chapter or page that you're looking for? So you really want to avoid these as much as possible because they don't transfer over well. And if you have a visually impaired student, they cannot read it essentially because they have no way for it to be read to them. All right, so let me stop before I show that. So that is, so I went through PowerPoint, I also went through PDFs pretty fast. I want to give everyone a chance once again to ask any questions about any of those before I do kind of my last kind of follow-up. All right, so if you have any questions, please let us know. But I'm gonna talk about my last little piece here. So from the student side of things, so where you see inside of WTClass, you see the little drop-down menu that you can expand out to get like the edit and those additional menu options. Students see an A button with a little down arrow. If a student clicks on that, it's going to open up a little pop-up window, and that's where they can get to those alternative formats. So that's how students are able to see those different ways, the audio version, the HTML, the different kinds of readers. You can also see them as well in the menu. There should be an option for alternative formats, and so you can see that and be able to see what it converted as well. Alternatively, go into student preview, not just edit mode. Don't just turn off edit mode because you're not going to get to what you need always, but actually going into student preview mode, and you can get to this as well, so you can see how students would see this as well. So that is basically the end of everything, and I'm doing good on time. I wanted to let everyone have a chance to ask any questions again, see if you have any questions on anything that you've been trying to make more accessible, help with any of it, maybe something that it may be we need to talk later on, but I want to give all of that kind of options. So as we're just waiting to see if anybody has any questions, you know, Ally is a wonderful tool that is built right in. It does only currently work with documents that you upload. It does not work with things like text that you build into the system. They are always improving it. So it is on the roadmap to actually look at content that is in the system more, things you actually like type into the text box and stuff like that. It does, however, check uploaded images that you've uploaded in there for alternative text. But past that, right now, it's only going to be uploaded documents that it's going to check, with the idea of it being improved upon later on. If you ever need any help with anything, we do offer office calls, one-on-one trainings, appointment. We can set up Zoom meetings. We can come to your office if that's what you really want. I know with everything going on, that's not necessarily the preferred method right now, but we can always set up Zoom sessions to be able to walk through things. Feel free to email us, call us, whatever, so that we can help you out with anything that you need help with when you're building your class. Like I said, accessibility is a big bite to swallow. So start by making little efforts. Every time you upload a new document, you look at that particular document and start now with any new documents that you add, trying to work to make those accessible.
Oh, Krista, I have
yes.
a question. So in some of my classes, I require the students to read a lot of articles. Some of them, if they're recent, that's not an issue because usually it's accessible online and it's built in. The accessibility is built in pretty not too badly into the article. But some of the older articles are much more of an issue. So far in the spring, because we had to move on to online really quickly, the solution had been for me to just give the article name and just to tell the students, you know, just go ahead and find it, which is, you know, not a bad strategy. But there are some articles that are difficult for them to get, and I can access them because of, you know, access to certain databases that I have that the university doesn't necessarily have. And I don't want the students to not have access to those articles. And so what can I do? Some of the things I have really banged my head against the wall to try to get the accessibility to that green level.
So that also brings up some other points. We also have faculty that they say they link through the library to databases, and some of those, you know, databases are, like you said, it's an old document and aren't necessarily accessible. If it's a case that you're going through the library already, you may want to check with contacting the library so that they can look at some of their other databases as well to see if maybe they can find another format of that document, that article that might be more accessible. They can also help remediate documents. with some of the ones that you are accessing because of your own kind of personal subscription to a journal or database or something like that. That comes back to kind of, you know, we can help you. We can help you try to make that more accessible. Because yeah, you're going to come across some that it's like it's an old document, and that journal or whatever has no desire to make it fully accessible, and there's not much you can do about it. Unfortunately, the ownership is on you as the instructor, as the faculty member, to make it accessible in terms of making sure all content is accessible.
All right, thank
But
you.
again, that doesn't mean that you can't ask us for help.
Okay, yeah, yes, that's good. I know that you guys are super busy, so.
Yep. So we try to do what we can. And sometimes it is, you post it as is, and if somebody comes back and says, hey, I'm having trouble with this, then you make that a priority. Okay, let's get this done now. Sometimes that becomes what you have to do, because I don't have time to fix this right now, and it needs a lot of work, but my students need this. So I'm going to make the effort to accommodate the majority of students who don't need the additional components of it. And then if I have somebody come back and say, I'm having trouble with this document, now let's make that a priority.
Thank you.
So any other questions? All right, then. Well, thank everyone. I thank everyone for coming and attending, and I'm hoping that you were able to get something out of this today and able to learn something. Like I said, Ally is easy to use. You just got to click the buttons on it, basically. So thank everyone for coming, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.